I want to welcome everyone to our monthly speaker series. I'm really excited to be here today. It's very much a full circle story. I am Forrest Tierce. I am the U.S. Project Director for Dharma Voices for Animals. Most of you on here know about DVA. We're an international Buddhist organization that advocates for animals worldwide. We do really amazing work. It's an honor and a privilege to get to be a part of DVA. And the coolest thing is that I heard about DVA through Dave Simon, who is our guest speaker today. And now I'm working for DVA. Dave hosts a biweekly vegan meditation that we'll mention again. It's on Monday nights, 6 p.m. Pacific. And I was attending this and I was talking about my frustrations with some of the Buddhist sanghas I had attended. And being at his vegan meditation was great. And he said, "Hey, you should check out Dharma Voices for Animals." I was like, "What's that?" And I looked him up and started attending the DVA monthly Sangha, which is the last Sunday of the month, and made a connection. And one thing led to another. Now I'm the U.S. project director. So it's great to be here. We have a really exciting guest with us today. Dave has a really amazing story, and we're going to get to know him better. Dave, welcome so much. You're up in South Lake Tahoe, correct?
I am. I am. Thanks for having me, and it's great to be here.
I'm just going to read a short part of Dave's bio just so you guys can kind of have an idea of what we're in store for. Then I'm going to start asking him some questions. Dave Simon is a vegan activist, lawyer, writer, and mindfulness practitioner. His book, Meatonomics, which if you haven't heard about it, it's great, from Conari Press in 2013, examined the broken market for animal foods in the US and recommended a heavy tax on goods containing animal products as a way to shift societal costs to producers and raise retail prices to levels that better reflect underlying costs. So there's a lot here. I want to kind of walk through. I want to the framework that we talked about. We're going to talk about how Dave became a vegan, talk a little bit about how he found Buddhism and his Buddhist practice, and then I want to get into his book, his practice as an animal rights attorney, and also what he currently does with his spiritual practice and some of his volunteer work with different groups he works with. So that's kind of the framework we'll go through, and just leave some time at the end for people to ask questions. We have an exciting guest today, and I'm excited to get into this. So, Dave, if you won't mind, how long have you been vegan, and how did that evolve for you? Did you grow up in a vegan household? Were you raised this way, or is this something you found? How did that evolution happen for you, and how long have you been vegan?
I went vegan in the spring of 2008, so I guess I'm going on 17 plus years, 17 and a half years. And no, it was not a gradual evolution at all. It was essentially an overnight switch. It was like a light bulb just kind of clicked. And it started because I watched this movie about Ingrid Newkirk, who's a founder of PETA, movie called I Am an Animal. The movie made me wonder, why would somebody go to these lengths? Like, it showed her getting up and having breakfast, and her breakfast was basically oatmeal. And I was like, how could, like, I eat eggs and bacon, with a big glass of milk every day. How could somebody eat oatmeal for breakfast? What could be so compelling about this message that would cause somebody to go vegan? So I started looking at videos on the PETA site, and this literally happened overnight, as I said. I my then wife was out of town, and after I had spent maybe 6 or 8 hours looking at stuff, all of the classic factory farming videos and testing stuff that people see. I was living in Tahoe then also. It was a spring, it was April 2008. I took all of my animal-based food and I put it on the balcony where it was cold. And I thought, let me try this for a day or two. And if this stuff, if it doesn't work, my food will still be there on the balcony and I'll bring it back into the house. And I just went vegan that night, basically, and never went back. It wasn't exactly the easiest way to do it. I assume everybody on this call is either vegan or on a vegan path. So you know that it can be challenging. I lived in a place where there were no other vegans. I had no support group. I had no mentor. I had no friends who were vegans, nothing. I had to figure stuff out. So I'd be in the supermarket looking at labels and, the standard stuff. But that was literally like a light bulb transition.
Yeah, sometimes things just click and all of a sudden it's like, what, So that's incredible. I thought the story was going to be that you put your stuff on the balcony and a bear took it all, so you had to go vegan. Is that one of the things that motivated you since you were so alone when you first went vegan? Was that one of the things that motivated you to start the support group you have, the vegan meditation? Is that kind of evolved out of that need for community?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the vegan meditation per se evolved out of that, but I did feel a very strong need to be part of a vegan community. I later moved down to Southern California, where there, as you may know, there's a huge community of vegans and animal rights activists in the tens of thousands, and that's where I sort of got my introduction to activism. Back at that time, California has now outlawed all this, but there were protests against animals in circuses, there were protests against fur retailers, there were protests against rodeos, foie gras. All of that stuff now, other than rodeos, has been outlawed in the state of California, which is great. But there was a big animal rights movement, and that sort of got me into the community that I wanted to get into.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Um, well, we're leading into activism and those things, but let's just real quick, how did you find Buddhism and when did that come into your story?
Yeah, so in some ways that was unrelated to my vegan journey, and in some ways more recently that became more related to my vegan journey. I've had two different entrees into Buddhism. When I was much younger, pre-vegan, I was interested in Zen, and I was living in LA, and I found the Los Angeles Zen Center, and I learned how to sit. And that was I'd read some stuff by Alan Watts, but my initial introduction to Buddhism was through Zen, and through a fairly rigorous approach to sitting and posture. Many years later, I was interested in Vipassana. So Zen, for those, not to get too technical, but Zen is sort of on the Mahayana side of Buddhism, and Vipassana is sort of on the Theravada side. So many years later, I became interested in Vipassana, and there are the most popular Vipassana group in the country is the one that S.N. Goenka founded. That typically starts with a 10-day silent retreat. And several years ago, I went and did one of those in Northern California. And I sort of feel like my meditation and mindfulness practice merges both a Zen approach with a Vipassana approach. I tend to sit like a Zen practitioner, cross-legged on a cushion, but I also tend to incorporate some of the Vipassana techniques like body scans and more awareness than counting breaths, that kind of thing. And I identify as a Buddhist over other spiritual paths.
Well, that's great. Yeah, and I have experience with those different types of meditation. I like how you describe that. So, um, I was thinking next we could kind of go into your evolution as a lawyer, how you practice law, and then go into your experiences as a writer with the book that you wrote. So, first, um, did you get into law to first protect animals, or is that was probably a little bit before that you first became a lawyer? How did it evolve into you becoming working for animals as a lawyer?
Short answer, no. It was animals were not on my radar. I mean, I
Yeah.
was 22 or something when I
Yes. Yeah, that
started
makes
law
sense.
school,
Yeah.
and I didn't go vegan until I was in my 40s. I became a lawyer because I was interested in environmental law. I thought maybe that was a path to help the environment. Many years later, I was just working for a health care company, you'd call it, in Southern California. And as I got more involved in the animal rights movement, we had more day-to-day practical frustrations around the logistics of doing protests and demos. And sometimes we just needed legal advice. And I didn't know anything about First Amendment law at the time, other than what you learn, the very basics in law school. But I educated myself on free speech, particularly in shopping malls. In California, unlike many other states, there's a unique right to protest on private property when it's a shopping mall because it's thought to be like a village kind of old town hall or town center concept. And I sort of became over time like the guy who would help organizations get the permits they needed to do free speech activities, both in shopping malls and elsewhere. And that was my kind of entree into doing legal work for the animal rights movement. And as that progressed, I became more, I mean, bear in mind, in the world of lawyers, there are litigators, people who go to court, and there are transactional lawyers, people who don't, but they create contracts and do HIPAA stuff. I was always a transactional lawyer. So my education in this area involved me sort of becoming a litigator, or just kind of because I needed to. Pretty soon I was going to court, I was taking depositions, I was defending depositions, and I was doing a lot of, we were bringing lawsuits against various kinds of animal abusers, rodeos, caparo practitioners. Caparo is a practice of ritually killing chickens. And I just sort of got throw yourself in and get that kind of education to animal rights law.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really cool to hear that you've done that type of work. You mentioned a couple of things you worked on. Could you share like a case that you worked on or a lawsuit that you worked on that was kind of like a defining moment in your career in the animal rights area?
Yeah, there's a huge mall in Costa Mesa, Southern California, called South Coast Plaza. And I think at one time it was the biggest mall in America or the second biggest or something. And we had an ongoing battle with them over the right to do expressive activity in the mall. I think there was, for example, there was a fur retailer. I think there was a store that sold animals from puppy mills, also now outlawed in California. And we wanted to go into this mall and protest, and the mall kept calling the police, and they kept getting us kicked out. And eventually, this was the first lawsuit that I drafted completely on my own, filed on my own, and took to court as a lawyer, something I'd never done before. We ended up winning the lawsuit. We ended up getting a substantial judgment as well, financial judgment, and it was a real confirming moment to me to think, wow, this like not only can you have some effect here, but you can like change the path for people in the future. And it made it a lot easier for people to get on that particular mall. I then went on with mostly with a partner, Brian Pease, another attorney and the founder of an animal rights group in Southern California. We went on together to sue pretty much all of the major malls and mall owners in California. And establish new access rights at, I would say, all of the major malls in California. If you were to name off the top 10 mall owners, they've probably all been sued by Brian and me over the years. So it's a little thing to say you've done, but it particularly in these days where free speech is so challenged, it's a good thing to have some effect in, I think.
That's amazing. I want to pause here for a second and just reflect on the fact that you said something, and it's a good reminder for all of us that are, feeling overwhelmed some days by what's happening in the world, and some days it just seems just like, how can we get through this? But Dave, you've mentioned all of these things that you stood up against and your cohort stood up against, and they are now illegal in California, right? So change has happened, and we need to focus on that positive mindset that when we stand up and we do the right thing and we share our voice, change does happen. And you have been a huge part of so many of those changes in California. Like that's really something really powerful to reflect on. And thank you for everything you did for everybody and the animals as well. So
Thanks for mentioning that. And obviously, I can't take much credit other than showing up with a sign. But it is quite remarkable. If you had asked people 10 years ago, do you think within 10 years California will have outlawed fur, animals and circuses, puppy mills, and foie gras? Most people would say, no way.
yeah.
But the state does tend to be a leader in things like that. So maybe it'll set the tone for the rest of the country.
Let's talk a little bit about your book. How did this book become a part of your story? I have a few questions about the book, but let's maybe just start. Um, when did you first become interested in the economics behind this? And it's something I've studied and looked into your book as well. It's really good information just to know. There's so much information, as vegans, it's almost like as soon as you say, "Oh, I'm vegan," you need to be prepared to have all of these nutrition conversations and ethical conversations and economic conversations. And you don't have to, but if you can. So it's good having you on here because you're obviously an expert in this area. So how did the book evolve, and what drew you into that area?
So I had moved to Southern California in early 2009, shortly after I went vegan. And shortly after that move, I became more involved in the animal rights movement down there. And I guess just as part of getting getting more engaged with the discussion in general, I sort of started to think about some of these issues that a lot of us don't think about, like why is chicken $2 a pound and apples are $5 a pound? Like why are things priced the way they are, and why and what effect do those prices have on consumer behavior? The obvious answer is they have an enormous behavior. If you can buy a Big Mac for $5, but a healthy meal costs 15, people are going to buy Big Macs. And it was just sort of that basic thought about pricing and how that drives buying decisions that made me think maybe there was a book there. Then, as you're writing a book, as I'm sure people in this group have, you go through a process where you develop a proposal, you send it to an agent, you go through a whole process, you find an agent, and the agent tries to find a publisher. It's a long, tedious process, and it goes through a lot of revisions. But eventually, with the help of the agent and the publisher feedback, I sort of developed this concept for this book that went on to get published in 2013.
That's amazing. Yeah, I was a park ranger before I became an employee for DVA, and I would give a talk to the public. They would come out to the Point Bonita Lighthouse in the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, and they would come to the lighthouse expecting to hear about the lighthouse. And I would talk about that, but then I would talk about the environmental impact of animal agriculture and what it's doing to the ocean and the trees and the land and the benefits of going plant-based according to the United Nations. And I would talk about global subsidies. I believe it's in the ballpark of $540 billion per year go into propping up animal agriculture, and those numbers are astronomical. So could you talk a little bit about how that system works for people, for me, that want to know a little bit more? So how do the subsidies prop up this broken situation where, as you said, it's cheaper to buy a Big Mac than a pound of apples? So how does that system work?
We got to take one step back and look at how laws get made in this country and in most countries where there's elected representation. In the U.S., our elected representatives tend to be very susceptible to cash that they receive as, among other things, campaign contributions. Now, many people, including Peter Singer, have described this system as corrupt. I don't think that that's inaccurate. I think we have a terrible system. And when people get elected based on promises they've made to people who gave them cash, legislative and policy decisions get made that are based not so much on what's good for the country or the people and animals in the country, but more on what's good for the people who gave me the cash.
Mhm.
And what we see is that the animal agriculture industry dominates lawmaking at both the federal and state level in this country, and they give a lot of money to people at various stages in their electoral process, and as a consequence, they have enormous influence in how laws get made. In many ways, in many cases, that influence turns into subsidies that get paid for dairy production, for beef production, for pork production. In many cases, that influence is more subtle and is handed off in different ways. There are, in addition, in this country, in addition to kind of flat out subsidies, like sometimes we literally just pay dairy farmers some amount per gallon of milk to help them produce more milk. We also have what are called checkoff programs, where we indirectly, um, the federal government indirectly influences buying of animal products. And these checkoff programs apply to a lot of animal products like dairy, beef, pork, and they amount to, when I wrote the book, they amounted to like a $500 million a year, and it's probably higher now. But these are it's the messaging that we've seen. That's stuff like milk does a body good, pork, the other white meat, beef, it's what's for dinner. Eggs have a checkoff program as well. The Incredible Edible Egg. That was a little sing-along ditty that I remember when I was a kid. And all of these things, again, the federal government is using these programs to tell Americans to buy more of these animal products, and they really work. They drive consumption in very aggressive ways. Typically, every dollar spent in a checkoff program drives like $6 to $10 in additional buying by consumers.
Propaganda that we've all been brainwashed with, right? So let's play a
Yeah.
little hypothetical fairy tale world. Let's say starting tomorrow, all of the subsidies that are poured into animal agriculture, every single penny of that was taken away and given to plant-based production, whether that's Beyond Meat or apples or bananas or tofurkey. What would it look like in 5 years? How fast would animal agriculture crash if there was the subsidies were just cut off immediately? But what would it look like if in 5 years all of those subsidies were funded and fueled to the plant-based foods?
Would be a wonderful policy change. It would clearly have a significant effect, but you have to remember most people who eat meat do it because they're conditioned to eat meat. There are lots of books on the subject. Melanie Joy has a good one. um, people like to eat meat. I mean, that's the bottom line. And if you raise the price of a Big Mac from whatever it is, $7 to $8, people aren't going to stop eating Big Macs. They might buy them a little less frequently. So consumption will go down a little. So in that scenario, you shift subsidies from animal products to plant-based products. Yes, we'll definitely see a change in behavior, but there would be a lot more required to really drive significant, dramatic shifts to plant-based to a more of a plant-based model in this country. Just because
Yeah.
people are so ingrained, and
Yes.
yes, the price cues do matter, but it's not everything.
What would a cost of a Big Mac or a gallon of milk or something like if subsidies were removed entirely from those industries? How much would those price per pound go up for a steak or whatever?
Uh, I don't
Hard
want
to
to be
say.
too disappointing, but subsidies by themselves don't drive price in a tremendous way. So if you eliminated all dairy subsidies, the price of a gallon of milk might go up 10%. You'd think that well, maybe that will reduce consumption by 10%. And maybe it would. It probably wouldn't. It might reduce consumption by 5% because there's a certain amount of elasticity of demand there. So people are going to continue to buy it regardless of price. The elimination of subsidies would have to be one plank in a multi-plank policy shift that would include eliminating checkoff programs. It would include eliminating other externalities. There's a lot of externalities. Externalities are things that an industry shifts on a society, doesn't pay itself. And we know that consumption of animal foods costs an enormous amount of societal dollars in healthcare costs through
Mhm.
things like cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. If those costs, those externalities, which Medicare and Medicaid pays a significant portion of, could be shifted onto the animal industry, you would see much more radical price changes at the cash register. And those kind of shifts would be much more important in driving consumer behavior.
So Dave's book is Meatonomics. It's on Audible, so you can listen to it while you're cruising around. Where else can you get it, Dave? I'm sure all of the major spots have it.
Uh, I yeah, it's everywhere. It's on
Yeah.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have they tried to sue you? I don't know this part of your story, but I know when Oprah said don't eat red meat, there was a whole big thing. She got taken to court. Have you been attacked
No,
because of this?
I've been fortunate. I have not been sued. California has a great mechanism to defeat a lawsuit like that. It's called anti-SLAPP. If somebody sues you in California for something that's an expression of free speech, you can actually get the case dismissed and you can get attorney's fees pretty quickly.
Wow.
So obviously I could be sued in some other state, but at this point the book's been out for 12 years, so I
Yeah.
don't think there's a continuing
Yeah.
big risk of that. Yeah.
Thank you for putting that book out there for everyone to learn more about this. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of your other spiritual practices. I see you're also on the advisory board of the Compassion Consortium, a non-denominational group that brings monthly spiritual engagement to vegans and animal advocates. Could you talk a little bit about that group and what you do there?
Yeah, for people who aren't familiar, maybe later you'll let me put a link in the chat. This is a wonderful group. People may know the name of Victoria Moran. She's a vegan writer. She's published a dozen and a half books probably on veganism over her lengthy career. She, her husband, and some other people founded this group basically to provide a forum to people on a vegan path who are also on a spiritual path, because I think they rightly found that unlike your organization, DVA, there are not a lot of organizations around that help to nurture both of these longings that we might have in life. On the one hand, both a longing to be kind to animals, and on the other hand, a longing to maybe be kind to people, and to be more compassionate, maybe more mindful, etc. And this organization has a monthly Sunday service, kind of like church, but without a lot of religious references. Typically, they interview some practitioner in this domain. It might be a rabbi, it might be an imam, it might be a Buddhist monk, anybody from any walk of life. And there's always a very sweet spiritual service that goes along with it. And I've sort of just gotten more and more involved in this group over the past several years, and now I go every Sunday or every monthly Sunday when we meet, and it's great. I think there's a meeting this what is it, the third Sunday of the month. So yeah, there's a meeting tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific.
That's amazing. I think Andrea put the link in the chat for anyone who wants to check that out. I didn't know that much about them. That's great. This sounds like a great support. I also wanted to ask you, I know it says you're a board member of the Animal Protection and Rescue League. And what is that group and what do you do there?
So that's an animal advocacy group based in San Diego, founded by Brian Pease, who, as I mentioned earlier, is an animal rights attorney. And that organization does a lot of legal work because Brian's a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. I'm now retired, so I don't do as much as I used to. But in addition to, suing animal abusers, over the past 15 or 20 years, we've had various campaigns that have targeted foie gras production for all of the big things that used to be an issue. I'd say foie gras continues to be one of the main things on the radar because in California, where it's been outlawed, there are still restaurants and other entities that ignore the ban. So there's a constant sort of enforcement process to keep that ban in place.
Well, that sounds like a great organization as well. Um, good work. You're a busy guy. You've done so many amazing things. I want to glean a little wisdom from you now, just from your own personal experience. You mentioned, having compassion for animals as part of our core tenet as vegans, as Buddhists. And then you also mentioned a minute ago, just when you were mentioning the Compassion Consortium about having compassion for humans. And this is an area where I personally really appreciate Buddhism allowing me to practice metta. I'm grieving the passing of my father. He passed away about a month ago, and it's been a big, painful loss. We were very close. My dad passed away from congestive heart failure at the age of 83. And as I said, I've been vegan for 18 years, and I tried my best for many, many years to present the science to him. And my dad's a PhD in genetics, so he's a scientist. and I could never get past his conditioning and could never get him to open his eyes. And the loss is painful, but also like, what if he would have listened? That what if is painful. So how do you deal with family that you love so much that is maybe stubborn or just really kind of like living in denial and very dedicated to that denial? Like, how do you deal with family and friends and just humans in general? What the path of being vegan for 17 years and having a Buddhist practice has helped you or has taught you how to deal with those things?
So sorry for your loss. As you and I discussed a few days ago, it's so sad and so frustrating. And my own dad, who's also 83, has the same issues, wears a pacemaker, and is just not interested in making a change. How do I deal with that and issues like that? It depends on the circumstances, and it always depends on who I'm trying to deal with, what are the underlying facts, and how do I think I might be able to have some influence. Here's one example. Andrea, since you're in Vegas, maybe you know there's a great restaurant there called Crossroads. Uh, it's a vegan restaurant, fairly high end. So it's like vegan fine dining. I have some friends from Southern California I've been friends with for a long time. None of them are vegan, but it's kind of every year we do a guys trip. And last year we went to Las Vegas. My friends are very understanding about my veganism, and I made a real big push to get everybody to go to Crossroads one night. And I wasn't harping on the veganism component. I was just saying, hey, this is a great restaurant. Look at the reviews. It's really, everybody loves this place. And so I got all my friends to go to this place. I didn't spend a lot of time while we're eating preaching because I just wanted them to have this experience of eating vegan food and discovering that it could be fun and taste good. And you don't have to have a steak. You can actually have a lion's mane mushroom steak, which is one of the great things Crossroads makes. That was one way to reach, an entrenched group of 50 and 60 something men who have eaten meat their whole lives, and to give them a little, alternative perspective. In the case of my own family, I have not had the greatest luck convincing family members. My mom went vegan for a while, but she could not sort of handle the social pressure of being vegan in a group of friends who are not vegan. So she couldn't really stick with that. My brother and I have had many discussions, sometimes arguments about it, but a long time ago, an activist in LA named Greg Kelly told me, look, if you're going to try to convince people to go vegan, your family is not the place to start. Start with people you don't have that kind of complicated relationship with, because it makes the process easier. And I think he has a good point. We bring so much baggage into our familial relationships that it just complicates any kind of discussion around stuff like this.
I've heard more than one activist. I think Earthling Ed said this, like the family is the last place to do activism. They will not listen. It's a struggle. So I'm grateful to have the Buddhist practice of metta and being able to just try to be able to show up and be loving. But I really wanted to, talk about DVA and our mission and what we talk about, and then tie that in, Dave, with a question for you. So, DVA, we are trying to raise awareness in Buddhist communities. You would think in Buddhism, may all beings be free. May they be free of suffering. May they be happy. May they be at peace. And the Buddha said, all beings love life. All beings fear death. Well, therefore, one should not kill nor cause to kill. The first precept is very clear and very simple. And I came into Buddhism thinking this was 20 years ago that I had to be vegan to be a Buddhist, and I found out quickly that is not the case. So this is DVA's mission where we're trying to raise the awareness around tying in the compassion of what Buddha taught, raising people's awareness around having mindful practice when it comes to animals. And so Dave, based on everything you've experienced in Buddhism, and what are your thoughts around Buddhists, and what has your experience been in different Buddhist sanghas with people who uh, talk about Buddhism, but then forget those simple core tenets of nonviolence, non-harming, compassion for all beings?
Obviously, as it has been for the people at DVA, it has also been for me a great source of frustration that while Buddhism, on the one hand, says you shouldn't kill, and that's the first precept, that there's not a lot of adherence to that for practitioners. And it goes beyond just Buddhism. I think if you look at a lot of spiritual leaders around the world, people who make it their life's work to promote compassion, tolerance, kindness, unconditional love, not many of them are vegan. It's very frustrating. The Dalai Lama, you'd think would be vegan, not vegan, and that is what led me and another vegan friend here who also likes to meditate to form vegan meditation. Just this idea that there sort of needs to be a forum for people who are both vegan and interested in the strict interpretation of the first precept, and that clearly works out. Now, our organization is not strictly Buddhist leaning; it's not denominational in that sense, but it tends a lot of the discussion tends to be around issues that are common in Buddhism. But yeah, it's an area of frustration, no doubt.
You're mentioning your vegan meditation group. Could you talk a little bit about that real quick? Just the group that you have biweekly?
I'll first mention just briefly, because I think this is kind of important. I've been the guy standing on the street with a sign yelling at restaurants serving foie gras or at the circus or whatever. And I'm at a different point now. And I sort of think that it's not uncommon for vegans to go through a transition like the one that I've gone through. In fact, Will Tuttle even says, I forget the exact nomenclature, but he says vegans go through three stages. First you're a shallow vegan, then you're an angry vegan, and then you're a deep vegan. Those are the words he uses. But I think a lot of us who have been vegan for a while and have gone through an angry vegan stage start to feel like maybe there should be more to it. It's easy to hate people and to say, you're not vegan. What's wrong with you? But the challenge is to love people and to say, you're not vegan. How can I help you understand why this path might make sense to you? Or you're not vegan. How can I just tolerate that? And how can I kind of hold this idea that I can be angry about something, but I can still feel love at the same time.
Mhm.
And I think in the context of political decisions that get made in this country and around the world, I think there's also a lot of room for us to learn how to both have a perspective that you don't agree with something or you don't agree with somebody and you wish that something were different and maybe you'll take steps to change it, but also have a perspective that you don't necessarily have to hate the decision maker. You can find some sort of compassion for a decision maker whose decisions you don't agree with. Those thoughts and challenges led me, and again, my friend Reed, who co-hosts this group with me, to start vegan meditation. And it's just been a wonderful experience. We now meet twice a month, as you mentioned. We've got a consistent group of 20 to 25 people, and we do about 15 minutes of silent meditation in the beginning, and then we have a discussion on a vegan, typically a vegan topic. It's a judgment-free forum for people in this very like the Venn diagram of vegans and spiritual interested people. It's a little sliver, but it's a judgment-free forum for people interested in both of those things to meet and talk and enjoy each other's company.
There's a lot of support if you're new to this path or not. You know how nice it is to be around like-minded individuals and have that support. So please don't feel isolated. I know when I feel isolated as a vegan, it can be very painful. So it's a great way to connect with others. And even if you don't share anything on there, just to be on there and see other vegans' faces is very good for us, very nourishing. So, Dave, that has been an amazing conversation with you. I'm sure there's so much more we could go into, but I do want to save time for others to ask questions.
Just want to say, David, thank you so much for being here and everything that you do. Before I came to DVA, I did grassroots activism for 8 years in so many states and countries. And I had moved to Mexico, did activism in California, and was shocked to learn that we could do our protest in the strip malls. In fact, I was looking over my shoulder because I didn't think it was true. And, when you do these protests, visibility is key. So thank you so much for making that possible, really.
My question is, it's something that's come up recently, is we and I often think about, I get frustrated that, the hypocrisy of the Buddhists. And then I'm thinking, why perhaps deviate? I mean, one opportunity is, I know that there are Buddhist practitioners out there and teachers that are vegan, but they don't come out of the closet with it. It's just not a topic that's brought up in their talking or on their websites. And I feel like, what about positive reinforcement? What about celebrating those that do have the, I don't know whether courage is the right way, but just a strength that they aren't going to worry that it's bad for I'm sorry for the cynicism, bad for business to mention their morality. And I just wonder if it's something that either Compassion Consortium or DVA has considered pursuing. It's just something that, that helps identify those who wish to be identified, to sort of join the club.
That's a great question. Dave, you go first, and then I'll tell you what DVA is doing.
Compassion Consortium, for example, which is the most intimate experience that I have in an area like this, regularly involves leaders from the world's religions who are vegan, who are making an effort to express a message of veganism to their respective religions. And it can be very refreshing to see that around the world there are vegan rabbis, vegan imams, vegan priests, and vegan reverends. I think that they do make that part of who they are when they express themselves to their congregations. Like, hey, I'm the vegan rabbi, and here's why that's an interesting or compelling subject. So I think that there is some of that going on. I think I also understand what you mean about, in some cases it's not good marketing to be vegan because you turn off your base, and I get that too. And all I can say is I wish people could have a little more courage about their convictions, particularly where, in Buddhism, the first precept is not ambiguous.
Yeah, and Susan, it's funny, you kind of mentioned DVA's mission here. So, DVA is based in the United States, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and Thailand. And in the Asian countries, we've had much more progress. They're already easily adaptable to more of a plant-based diet than the Western culture we have here in the United States of carnism. So here in the US, we've had our work cut out for us. I'm the third person to be in the position of US project director. And I'm kind of taking what's been passed on, and we created something. It's called the Sustainable Sangha Project. So the Sustainable Sangha Project is an initiative by DVA to create a community of vegan Buddhists by leaning into the fact of the environmental crisis that's happening right now and leading with the word sustainable, because many Buddhists who may or may not be interested in veganism are very much aware of the environmental crisis. So sustainability is a hot topic. When you tie in the environmental crisis caused by animal agriculture to Buddha's teachings, they meld perfectly, and it makes so much sense to not harm animals and to not harm the earth. So the Sustainable Sangha Project is what we're launching to create a community and to bring as many people together. So I've already had 2 different sanghas sign on board. Any sangha, any retreat center that is already serving plant-based food is a candidate and is welcome to join. And what we're trying to do is to get 100 different sanghas or retreat centers across the United States to be a part of this, so that it becomes normal to offer plant-based foods. There's a place in Santa Fe called Mountain Cloud Zen Center. They have a no flesh on campus rule. So they're perfect. They allow people to bring whatever, but they don't cook that. And there's another group in Santa Cruz called Land of Medicine Buddha. So these two sanghas have signed on. This is just going to gain momentum. And my goal by the end of 2026 is to have 100 different retreat centers, all part of the Sustainable Sangha Project, to where it becomes kind of a well-known thing that, oh, all of these different places are doing this work. And the motto is one bowl, one earth. The bowl in Buddhism is a symbol of humility. We receive alms from the earth, and one earth is we're all on one planet together. So, um, if anybody wants to talk with me more about this, my email is my name, FORREST, at dharmavoicesforanimals.org. Please reach out if you have a center or a teacher or anybody that would possibly be, would want to be a part of this. The goal, as I said, is so now that we have Santa Cruz and Santa Fe, then we're going to get, so then I'm going to be able to present this to somebody and say, hey, we have 30 different retreat centers that are a part of this movement. And then they can get on board and say, hey, we're just doing something that other groups are doing. And we're just trying to shift this from being kind of a fringe conversation uh, to the conversation. Why are we not serving plant-based food only when we're having these retreats, right? So, yeah, so that's the goal of DVA, and that's what we're launching, and it's gaining traction and it's coming together. DVA just received a grant from the BESS Foundation, BESS. They're a well-known charitable organization, and they have donated to many, many other Buddhist groups. So we're getting in with the right people, and the thing is gaining traction. So that's the goal. We're on it. We're trying to make it happen.
That sounds like a great initiative.
Uh,
Wish you a lot of success with it.
Thank you. And hey, I'll put a little plug in. DVA, we are a nonprofit. Like everything we do is through donations from people like you. So if you want to help the Sustainable Sangha Project and animals become a monthly donor, we got like a $5 a month donor all the way up to whatever you want to do. So for the cost of a cup of coffee, you can help DVA reach our goals.
I used to live in Los Angeles, which is how I became familiar with DVA, and I moved back to the UK about 18 months ago. And my heart does, I lived there for 35 years, so I do miss Los Angeles, and I listen to some radio and podcasts from there. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Rich Roll. He's a plant-based athlete, and I listened to his podcast, and he had the Korean vegan on this week. Both of them actually live in the Los Angeles area. One of the things that I found upsetting, but I actually did witness before I moved from Los Angeles, and they were discussing on his podcast, is that there appears that a lot of vegan restaurants are shutting down, and also that there is much less investment in plant-based proteins. And I wondered if you'd heard about that and if you had any thoughts.
I haven't been in LA for a while, and I had not heard that restaurants are shutting down, but I have known that manufacturers of plant-based foods like Beyond and Impossible are struggling. And I've seen that some of the fast food restaurants that originally carried Beyond and Impossible products, Panda Express used to have Beyond Chicken, they no longer do. Del Taco, I think, used to have Impossible Meat, they no longer do. I think there was an initial sense of excitement and novelty for the non-vegan world around some of these vegan meats. I think that once that novelty wore off, it became less sustainable to sell them commercially. And unfortunately, until something changes, that's with the novelty gone, people are back to eating the non-vegan meats, which is disappointing. I don't know how to explain the restaurant change, but that's disappointing as well. I don't know, Forrest, do you have any insight on that?
I've heard some of that too. I lived in Los Angeles, and I knew one of the places I used to go closed down. You know, restaurants close often, and there's definitely patterns with that. I know the pandemic caused some troubles with some restaurants, but there was a restaurant. I'll tell this story. So I did research on this. There was a restaurant in Las Vegas that had been a long-term vegan establishment that went out of business, and there was the front page news on CNN. I don't remember the name. Andrea just left. She would say it. It was a very long-term famous chef there. They went out of business. That's front page on CNN. So I'm an investigator. So I go in, okay, where was this restaurant? What other restaurants in Las Vegas closed at the time? And it turns out in this one area of Las Vegas, 10 restaurants closed. A vegan restaurant, a steakhouse, a barbecue restaurant, a seafood restaurant, because this one area was in a geographically desirable area. What made the front page of the news? Not the 35-year-old steakhouse that went out of business in Vegas. but the vegan restaurant went out of business, and that was front page CNN. So the news we're fed is often feeding into these things. And as a vegan, I'm very cautious when I repeat those stories. And I'm kind of maybe a little disappointed because I know if you go on to Happy Cow, I looked at LA, they have like 60 vegan restaurants. So maybe Nick's on Beverly's closed because they lost their lease, and Real Food Daily closed because of whatever, but like 4 new restaurants have opened. So I look big picture, and I often like really take a lot of those stories with a grain of salt. But I do know, like with the Impossible Burgers and beyond and those things, like Animal Ag, they have billions of dollars to continue to say these Beyond Burgers and Impossible Burgers are overly processed and not healthy for you, and shift consumer mentality so fast. It's like they were Beyond Impossible Burgers were on the menu at Burger King, and now they're not. Like, I'm not surprised, but inevitably, Animal Ag will crash, and we will shift towards this. It's like we are just driving this train straight into the wall faster and faster every year by not making the change.
I'll add one more piece of news to that. On Compassion Consortium a year or so ago, Victoria Moran interviewed the founder of Miyoko's Cheese. And they were talking sort of about the same phenomenon, which is this initial enthusiasm for non-vegan cheeses and meats that's kind of waning. And she said that there's now what's becoming termed vegan 2.0, which is a new focus on healthier, less processed vegan alternatives to traditional meat and cheese. And I'm optimistic about that. In fact, I've seen and we bought some of this stuff ourselves. For example, it's stuff like jackfruit based, carnitas, or pork shreds. And so it's not heavily processed. It still tastes pretty good. And maybe that's what the market needs, is a shift toward healthier vegan meats and cheeses, so that stuff without as much saturated fat and sodium is just more appealing. And maybe that's what the problem is with Beyond and Impossible right now.
I do a lot of outreach where I live, and one of the things that we do in the city centre, we do outreach every weekend, is that we do give out samples of vegan food for people to try. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm a great believer in plant-based nutrition, the healthy benefits, having worked in healthcare for so long. But when you're giving away free samples, what people that eat meat gravitate towards is something they're familiar with. So they will eat the vegan sausage rolls, or they'll try the cheese if it tastes like cheese. But if you try and push something that's sort of more healthy, you don't get as much interest. And we get them in with the food so we can then start talking to them about veganism.
And I also wanted to just remind you, so Compassion Consortium meets tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. There's a link in the chat. You can also just Google Compassion Consortium. Vegan Meditation meets on Monday in 2 days, and that's at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern. There's also a link in the chat for that. But if you can also just Google vegan meditation, it's veganmeditation.org. I think anybody who enjoyed this discussion and these issues, you would love these two groups. So it's not competitive with DVA at all. It's synchronistic.
Absolutely. We're all in this community together. So
David, I'll just quickly say it's so great to meet you. My name's Kartik. I'm also a vegan attorney doing environmental law mostly, and I started helping DVA with their Bay Area chapter, and I've known about Meatonomics, but I didn't know you were practicing First Amendment protection for animal advocates, and it's really cool. It's a great body of work for thank you. So thank you for being an advocate in lots of different ways. I really appreciate it.
yeah, we're really excited. Kartik is starting up a DVA chapter in the San Francisco Bay Area. So we'll have a local chapter in Chicago and in San Francisco. And we're going to kind of launch these 2 pilot programs to see how they go, and then try to get other cities like Los Angeles and other areas as well. So
That's
thank
great.
you all for the work you do. And Dave, I'm so grateful that you agreed to come on and share your life story and your experiences with us. This was really an outstanding hour, and this will be posted to our YouTube channel for anyone that wants to share this with a friend or pass it on to their colleagues or whatever. So lots of great information here. put my hands together in gratitude and say thank you all for coming today. May the love that we have in our hearts be shared with all beings, and may all beings be free from their suffering. And may each of us walk this path with love in our heart and light in our eyes, and be examples of love and light so that all beings can find a way free from their suffering. So may all beings be free. Thank you all for coming, and I'm really grateful to have been here with you today.